such a key role. What motivates you as its leader?
Well, I think, just to take your invite, I guess quite a few people here do know HMRC. I haven't totally loaded the audience with my mates, but there are a few familiar faces. And I think a couple of things about HMRC, which we do share with others. I don't think anyone's completely unique. First of all, we're quite large, so 66,000 staff, but our activity involves collecting the money, the taxes and revenues that the whole of public services depends on. So last year that meant collecting £475.6 billion, which is quite a big number. And then all of the rest of you spend that really, really quickly. So we feel a close bond to all of you in that sense. But we also have responsibilities for paying out monies as well. So obviously everybody kind of knows about things like child benefit, but tax credits is our big payout, and over 6 million families depend on us paying out £30 billion in tax credits. So we are a pretty big transactional department. And then finally, we try and help the Chancellor develop policy so that the tax system is as sensible and fair and understood as we can make it. Now, that is not the same as saying everybody likes to pay tax. We kind of know that you don't. But the hope is, if we do it well, and people understand it, that they'll feel that it's a fair system that underpins the society that we live in. And I guess that's what motivates me. I've always been associated with public service, and I think being part of the whole chain of public service, but more importantly, being part of the kind of infrastructure of provision, you know, just feels worth getting up for.
So 6 million families relying, I mean, that's phenomenal.
Yeah. And 39 million taxpayers paying us money. By the way, over 90% of our money kind of comes in. So this issue about tax avoidance, which dominates the headlines, understandably in lots of ways, sometimes overshadows the fact that in our country, people do kind of get that you have to pay your tax.
Now, you've mentioned the size of the department, over 66,000 employees. I mean, that is huge. How do you know, in your responsibilities about the organisational effectiveness of that organisation, make sure that those staff, each and every one of them, are developing the way they need to deliver those services?
Yeah, well, it's a real challenge. I mean, the department is a very technical and professional department. So we have about 17,000 tax professionals, and we probably have upwards of 10,000 people in what we would call the operational delivery profession. Yeah. So I suspect in terms of our share of the major professions of the civil service, we're right up there. And it is a real challenge. But one of the things about the civil service reform, there's quite a lot of stuff about the civil service reform not everybody likes. We might go on to deal with that in Q&A. But one of the positive things, I think, has been this very strong commitment to learning and development. Absolutely. And so what we're really trying to do is make sure that both on the professional side, but also on the more general development side, that we are really focusing on that. For me, it's one of the reasons the performance management changes are so important. I think the basis for developing yourself is a really good set of feedback, prompted by you and by evidence, but, you know, so you know yourself, you know what you do well, you know what you do less well, but then supported by the encouragement and the help to fill in those development gaps, build your strengths, build your adaptability. So we're trying very hard to make sure that learning and development sits right at the heart of what we do, and that more and more people know what career pathways are available to them. Only at the beginning of that journey, but that's one of our plans.
I think many civil servants feel we're on a clear journey to be reducing the size of the civil service, and they feel if there is fewer of us, are we actually going to get the time to do that development? What would you answer to that?
I mean, we are going to be a smaller civil service. There's no point beating about the bush. In HMRC, we're going to introduce a digital agenda. That's going to make sure that some of the administrative tasks that currently take people can be done online and more automatically. Now, the positive thing about that, I think, is that the jobs it leaves will be the more skillful jobs, the more value-added jobs. And I think in terms of time to train, well, I suppose there's a couple of things. One is I have a wide view about what training means. It doesn't always mean classroom-based training. It increasingly means high-quality e-learning, which can be done in limited amounts of time on your own. Most of us have got, if she could fish it out, she'd get a handheld. Most of us increasingly have a smartphone, and as more of this is available online, I think, even if it's your train journey time, there is time, but we also as employer have to make some time. Yeah. But I think the learning from each other, the learning on the job is equally important. And so what we're trying to create is I suppose an atmosphere in which people see learning opportunities wherever they can. Yeah. We've had some fantastic examples. For instance, one of our sites who had a poor record, one of our worst on sickness attendance, it became a kind of whole site thing to deal with how you make a healthy workforce. And they had market stalls and lunchtime sessions and information boards, and they kind of made the training wrap all the way around. So I think it's partly about our ingenuity about what we think when we say training.
I don't know how many of you go around HMRC, but I love it. I walk through it, and there's all these fabulous boards everywhere and posters of staff doing great things. So I think you're grabbing learning while you're going.
Pace setter, really one of my team mouthed. If you walk into HMRC and you say pace setter, one of two things happens. People either go, yeah, or boo. So it's kind of, it polarises a bit.
Now, one of the things Sir Bob Kerslake was saying earlier is he really wants to see a civil service where people are moving in and out of different sectors and sort of replenishing, our experiences and really building on those. You've not always worked for the civil service.
I thought she was going to say I've not always worked.
What experiences have you brought with you from the other sectors that you've been in to this job?
Yeah. Well, I'm a long-term public servant. Both you and I are the same, Katherine, and in that respect, I started in local government and moved into the civil service about 7 years ago. When I was in local government, I have to be honest, slightly unusually, I also moved about the tiers of local government. So if you think moving from local government to central government is a challenge, try moving from a district council to a county council, because, they think they're different beasts. And I suppose from my perspective, there's more that we share than that's different. I found that with departments as well. Home Office, HMRC, DFT, the things we can learn from each other are fantastic. And I think being more open to the experiences of others, had the benefit of working very closely with the voluntary sector as well. So my view in that space is we should be confident about what we do well. I do not believe public servants always learn from others, if you like. It's not one way. We have a lot of skills and expertise we can share. But I think being open to the possibility that someone else has cracked something that will be useful to you, or that they might see into your business a perspective that you can't see, that's an approach I think, because I have moved, I perhaps bring with me as my automatic default model.
Brilliant. Okay. Now, this is quite a topical subject, but you've alluded to it already about the amount of tax that is paid, but how the headlines grab issues about payment. And how important do you think is a sense of fairness within HMRC about the way tax is modelled and the collection of taxes? And do you think you have a role in chasing both the big and the small, or do you go after where you're going to get the biggest money or the most regular return? What's your model?
Yeah, well, I think it's absolutely crucial that the tax system is trusted and is seen to be even-handed, and we spend a lot of time trying to make sure both that is true but also that it looks to be true. And what I would say is we apply the rules that we've got the same across all levels. One of the factors of life, I guess, and could almost take a straw poll of this when we go on to Q&A, but one of the factors of life is people tend to assume that the things that they do are more reasonable and the things other sectors do are less reasonable. So if I, for instance, explain to you that, much as we all love them, that SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, form about 60% of the tax gap. If you talk to a small enterprise, they would go, well, yeah, of course, I don't pay every pound, but, I'm only a little business and that doesn't matter, does it? If they say a big business doing the same thing, possibly on the same proportionate scale, they will go, well, that can't be right. So I think the role we have to play is to help people understand that when everybody pays their taxes, first of all, you all spend it on really good public services. It's not like we shove it under the Chancellor's bed or anything, so that they understand the purpose. And as an ex-local authority chief exec, one of the things I got used to saying to people, about sort of avoiding paying for services is you've got to think of it as if you're taking service away from someone you love. You know, why would you not fund the services that support your mum when she's old and needs care, or your children when they're in school? So I think you've got to make it personal, really, and I think we can help with that. We're going to do some stuff around tax transparency that tells people where their tax is spent. But I also think we have to publicise what we do so that people see that we are turning our spotlight everywhere, and whether that's a campaign against plumbers or barristers or doctors, or a campaign that encourages multinationals to pay their tax. Our kind of basic mantra is we want your tax, not your penalties, and if we can get you to pay, that's our main reason for being. So trying to get out there, talk more, illustrate what we do, remind people what it's for, but we will stick at not talking about people's individual tax, because that's what Parliament told us was our rules, and whoever, you know, shouts at us or asks us to do something different, we will hold firm to the statutory duty that's placed on us.
Brilliant. Now, I don't know if any of you heard the headline on Radio 4 yesterday about, you know, almost every business in this country is under attack from cyber spying and sort of digital fraud and attacks. And I don't know, Lynn, if you've got your padlocked, this is wonderful padlocked bag here with all your special securities. How much is HMRC under sort of cyber attack, if you like, and what do you do to prevent them getting through?
Yeah, I mean, we have fantastic IT people, and they work very hard. Our systems are very big and quite old, and sometimes quite clunky. So the VAT system we run was put in the early 1970s, and it's still the same machine, which means there are very limited. The easiest way to bring us down there would not be cybercrime; it would be taking out the two people that know how the machine works. But in terms of cyber attack, we have really regular attempts. We try to stay very alert to those, and we try to make sure that we build and design in a way that limits the opportunity for people. But security is one of the reasons we can't always transform as quickly as people think. So quite a lot of you will be used to getting letters from HMRC. Who's had a letter from HMRC? Go on, you all have, really. You've probably put it in that pile of things you're not going to deal with yet, but it'll be there somewhere. And people will often say to us, why can't I email you? And the reason is because email is sufficiently insecure that if we emailed you back, we could be emailing anyone, anywhere, really. And so what we're trying to do for the future with our digital transformation is get to a point where people can have an account with HMRC, a bit like they have a bank account. Online banking? Anyone? Yep. Well, hopefully you're looking forward to having an online HMRC account, and in that space we will have a secure route in, be a bit like a bank, or be a combination of personal details and a security code, and we think that that will help protect as we go online from the constant and inevitably increasing attacks, but we will have to be vigilant.
Brilliant. Okay, colleagues, I could keep asking Lynn all sorts of questions, but I'm sure you've all come here as well with some in mind. We may have covered them, but is
I'll
there
come and share my microphone with anyone that fancies
Yes,
it.
we share a microphone. Yes, so...
Well, I work for HMRC, so I'll speak to them.
Yeah.
I'm a trainee, a VAT assurance officer in SME. So obviously the things about small businesses and large businesses obviously rings home for me. But being quite young and being new to the department, so this is more on a specific HMRC level, how do you feel with the sort of talent retention that is spoken about so often? How do you feel you're going to be able to address the age crisis that's running through HMRC at the minute, where there's a gap of probably 10 or 15 years between the last lot of recruits and people like myself?
Okay.
I got myself into a little bit of hot water in front of one PAC on this, because I sort of used the phrase that the department was too old, which I was, obviously and instantly shot down for being ageist, which kind of wasn't my intention. But the real challenge for us, as you say, is a fairly long period of not recruiting as we downsized in order to give job security to as many of our skilled staff as we could, but as a result not recruiting very many or any people for quite a long period. And we now got to the point where we have some frightening statistics. I think in one of our teams we have 8 people aged over 60 for every one aged under 30, which is terrifying. Makes me feel young apart from anything. So, what we've been trying to do is get back into the habit of accepting that even in periods of downsizing, it's really quite important that we keep recruiting. And that what we need to do is bring enough young people into our business whilst our experienced people are still there to help them and to train them, because our experience is that the classroom training does so much, but in an area like VAT you've got to go out with an inspector and learn from an expert. So although it's hard, we're trying to plan the future so that we keep up our numbers, but what I think we've also got to do is make sure that blend is right. And we've got to keep some of our experienced people as long as we can, so that, you know, they're there to teach those of you that have joined us. I don't think we'll be the only department in that space, but I think our significant downsizing might have exaggerated it for us, because the pre-merger size of HMRC when it was Inland Revenue and Customs was well over 100,000. Wow. So we've taken a lot of people out already, and I think it was very noble to do that in the way we did, but the unintended consequence is an ageing population without enough refreshment. Yeah.
I work in HMRC. There's been a lot of talk today about how important it is to deliver the civil service reform agenda, but it's clear from the people surveys that employee engagement, I think particularly among frontline staff, remains an issue of concern. I wondered what more you felt could be done, sort of coming down from the top, to improve engagement on the front line.
And I'm sure that's, I mean, it's a particular issue for HMRC and for the big departments, but I think it's an issue for all of us that we should care about whether people are feeling happy and engaged. HMRC's traditionally held up everybody else. We've been, I think, bottom of the staff survey scores since they were started. And I don't think the current level of change, not just in the areas that affect us personally, but in our businesses, I don't think that's going to make it easy to change that. But what we're trying to do as a department is, first of all, move into a kind of a culture where we expect to have conversations about things. I think without sort of deliberately meaning to be so, we're quite a hierarchical department. And so we had a bit of an injection of consideration by an external expert, a woman called Nita Clark. She produced quite a hard-hitting report that said to us, if you want to build up trust, you've got to be more open. And so what we're trying to do, I think it's early days, is talk about the difficult things as well as the easy things. So just an example, I mean, it is only small, but this week, after the spending review decisions, no, actually last week, after the spending review decisions,
Ladies and gentlemen, the final keynote session with James Pinnell will shortly begin in the auditorium.
Oh, get up and run away. So on the Friday after the spending review, we had an all-staff dial-in. We had 1,100 people on the call, and we just talked about what the spending review means for us. Now, we couldn't answer every question, but I'm hoping that will start lots more conversations. And I think we have to learn to be a place that takes the passion of our workforce as a good thing and doesn't see it as frustration and angst, that kind of lets it out and makes use of it. But I am realistic about that. I think you don't make those kind of changes instantly or overnight. Excellent. And I mean, if anyone's got clues, if other departments have done things that you think have made a real impact, for instance, DWP, in the last year, their staff engagement scores as a big department went up 6 or 7%. So I've been talking to Robert Devereux about what we can learn from that, back to my message of learning. So if you've got good ideas, you know, just email them to me and we'll try them.
Okay. Who else would like to ask a question?
We've got hoverers at the back, haven't we?
Yeah, we have 5 more minutes left.
Okay,
so any more?
Wise words? You might need to come a bit closer for my microphone.
What are you doing about the pay scales? People coming in at the bottom of a pay scale, working opposite somebody at the top of a pay scale. How quickly are people going to catch up, you know, with the 1% budget you've got?
I mean, there's a slightly tougher question that says, if you're going to abolish increments, how are you ever going to get from the bottom of a grade to the top? So I'll just, you know, for the sake of brevity, I'll sort of rephrase it a little bit. HMRC actually stopped using increments several years ago, but this is you know, the publicity over this debate around the spending review has rather ignited what that means for people. And what we've been trying to do over, I suppose, the last 7 or 8 years is to shorten the length of civil service grades, because if there's not incremental progression, then, you know, why you need something that's got a 16 or 17 percentage point difference between the top and the bottom. It's just a bit weird. And so we've been trying to say, well, there's a grade for the job, and it probably should have less of a gap from the top to the bottom. But I think what we've Well, yes, so we've been lifting the bottom, and that doesn't feel great because the people on the top, which is about over half our staff in HMRC, they sit there and they don't see a revalorised top to their pay grade. The people on the bottom get an increase, but they're still on the bottom, so psychologically they don't necessarily feel better. But over time, we will end up with shorter grades. I think the other thing I would say, and we're just, debating this year, is when we get pay grades, I think as departments we have to think more carefully about how we use them. And so what we're contemplating doing this year is recognising our 1% disproportionately to those people who are towards the lower end and who are achieving good productivity, so that we kind of lift them up quicker. And my own personal view, I don't believe any of us is entitled to just have a pay increase on the basis of time served. I never have, but I do think we could expect to see experience gained or milestones reached as advancement. And I think if we ended up with shorter grades with some clear milestones for advancement, staff would know where they were. And so, that's the kind of model we're trying to get towards.
Excellent. Thank you, Lynn. Any more? Any more for any more? One final one.
Yep.
Yes?
Right, thank you. Sorry to be another HMRC person asking a question.
There you go.
I mean, generally, most of the things in the reform seem reasonable. One of the main concerns I have is that the attack on sickness levels, it's often perceived as an attack because you've got people now who may have 5 or 6 days ill in a year who are being threatened with stage 1 formal procedures. And that seems totally overboard. You could have 3 or 4 days ill with an illness, you could then have 6 months off, another 3 or 4 days. You're into a stage 1 potentially. And I know it's saying you shouldn't be in that, but a lot of management are going down that route by default. And what can you do from the top to rein back the more aggressive element of management?
Again, not every department uses exactly the same system, but I think most departments in recent years have been working at what system they use to manage poor performance or sickness attendance, and I think both those things are important. What we've done in relation to sickness attendance is to try and make sure that managers have points of intervention and a clear understanding that we expect them to do something, that it is a manager's responsibility and not just something that, if you like, the centre of the organisation does. But what we have done is to try to be clear that there is an element of discretion needed around the application of these rules, and so they're guidance to help managers manage something as opposed to pinch point gates that you go through. And I think you've hit on a very important point. I think what we've got to do at the same time is build up managers' confidence to use these systems, because otherwise, I wouldn't myself use the term aggressive, I would use the term mechanistic. Managers just sort of get in the next stage is this, and they do it, and they don't look behind it. I think what senior people like me have to do is show by talking about these issues, so we have forums, we have hot seats, that we do expect people to utilise the guidance as it's meant to be used, but if in doubt, to ask for help. And we have some very good HR advisors who are there to help managers, not to do it for them, but to help them when they reach points that are difficult. So an example recently was someone with a disability who felt that their manager didn't really get the extra flexibility that they needed and was kind of going into standard sickness management in circumstances where actually this was a recovery period from the underlying disability and clearly needed to be dealt with differently. So I think we have to encourage conversation, in a sense dispute resolution where it happens, but also build up a manager's skills and confidence to manage their workforce and to do it in the round rather than think they do the narrow giving out tasks and someone else does the difficult bits. And And again, that would be for me a very important change that's gone on in the civil service over the last few years, that we've really started to expect managers to manage in the round, manage their people, manage money, manage productivity. And if we want them to do that, we have to support them to learn those skills.
Excellent.
Right, is this a non-HMRC
yes,
one?
One last question, there we go.
Hi, I'm Sajna. I'm a project management specialist in the Home Office. Just following on from your point, really, in that I know that from my own personal experience, when I've known that for certain medical reasons that I might have a bit of a bad spell, because I have a really good relationship with my line manager anyway, and we've thought of all sorts of creative kind of solutions. I have a laptop, for example. So if I need to call him up in the morning, 8 o'clock, and say, do you know what? I can work from home. I just can't get on the tube. I just can't physically travel. I'm not well enough to travel, but I'm going to be bored stiff at home. I can work. Most likely he'll be like, fine, just, continue working, get on with it. If there's any issues, let me know. And I think there's quite a bit of an onus on the person to speak to your manager, and to kind of, people they're not by nature trying to catch you out or trying to think, why are you 5 minutes late? There must be some, you've done something wrong. I think normally it can just be just ignorance, and it's up to us to help our managers to understand the varied kind of situations we all have. And I've also, had members of staff who have had to take special leave, and actually being flexible in terms of those triggers then popping up because you already know what the wider situation was. I think if we're just a bit more confident, both in having the conversation with our line managers, but us as line managers just taking more of a common sense approach, then hopefully with the civil service reform plans, I think even then, I don't think people should feel the effect of that.
Very good. Very, very good. Now, hands up, how many of you have made your pledge yet? Your Be Exceptional pledge. Oh, excellent. Well done.
Am I the only one?
Yes, no, that's really good. Each of us, before we leave, I hope you'll consider making a pledge about what you've learnt today and what, as all good training events, what you're going to go do differently back in the office and workplace tomorrow. So the killer question for Lynn, to whet all your appetites, is what is your pledge to be exceptional?
Well, I haven't done my pledge yet, and if I'm honest, I haven't thought about it. I think one of the things I've been umming and ahhing about is we are trying to go much more into mobile working and things like that. And I'm still a bit of a paper fiend. As my team know, they're laughing at me from the back because I have to not only padlock my backpack because it contains sensitive stuff, but I also sometimes need a horse and cart to take it home. And I think I'm going to pledge to try and get myself onto our trial for using a tablet, which is something I've been encouraging other people to do, but slightly stepping back from. But if I'm allowed a second desire, it is to just continue learning from other people, because I thought your summary of, how to make the best of being in a challenging circumstance yourself and to be part of the solution. I think if we all just left today with that pledge that, when there's a problem about, we'll pledge to be at least half the solution, I think that would be a fantastic piece of learning we'd all take away from you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you all very much for being here. And can we just give Lynn a lovely round of applause for your very, very open answers. Thank you, Lynn. And I think you're the hardest working speaker, having to get up and down all the time as well, so thank you.